Hello, and welcome to another episode with Green Team of the Legendarium. Today, we are covering The Wall of Storms, which is book two in Ken Liu's The Dandelion Dynasty saga. And for today's episode, we are only covering parts one and two. It's quite a chunky book. There's quite a bit to discuss, so we needed to split this book up into two episodes. But don't worry, we're still going to have a great discussion. And I guess I should even say who I am.
No, no, no.
I'm your host, BefuddledPanda, and today we have a full house. Joining me is Sean,
Hey, how we doing?
Spook,
Hello.
Yetti Beats,
Hello, hello.
and new to this crew, it's Seth, aka Grinchbat.
Hey.
Welcome, welcome. I am very excited. This is actually kind of funny because as we go through the series, we keep growing in number of people who are like, "Hey, we want to discuss this book." Um, Although I don't think we'll grow beyond five. But
We'll have seven for book
welcome.
four.
And so real quick, like I said, uh, The Wall of Storms is book two in the series. So if you haven't read book one, highly recommend you go do that or at least listen to our episodes. We have 3 episodes on the first book, which is The Grace of Kings. But diving into The Wall of Storms, we'll start with just some general non-spoiler reaction from the crew. It's quite so when we were talking about the first book, we had said that Ken Liu had written The Grace of Kings as pretty much a prequel for the series. He had to set up a lot of the history, a lot of the characters, a lot of the world, and honestly, a lot of the philosophical little foundations in order for him to really write the story that he wanted to. And so now in The Wall of Storms, we're getting to that story that he wanted to tell. So real quick, Spook, let's start with you. General reactions so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think so far I'm enjoying it as much as I did Grace of Kings, but in a completely different way.
Mm.
The pacing, it's like a different author is writing this book. The pacing is completely different. We get to slow down. We get to see the characters almost on a day-to-day kind of thing. Yeah, I love the continued focus on philosophy and kind of personal beliefs, but also changing what he's discussing, where the first book is more about what makes a good leader and kind of what philosophy a good leader should follow. It's now more like, what should we as a people follow?
Mm.
So I like how different it is from the first book, but that difference doesn't make it any worse. It makes it just as good, and hopefully by the end of kind of finishing this book, better than the first book.
Okay, nice. What about you, Sean?
Well, so you mentioned how it's supposed to be like a prequel in Ken Liu's eyes. And I was thinking about that, and I don't know if I entirely agree.
Okay.
Because if it's a prequel, it's kind of separate from the series. But I don't know if book two so far is doing anything terribly different from book one to where it need to be separated in any way. It feels like all one story, all one vision. So in my mind, Grace of Kings is just book one. No real prequel designation, even though obviously it's not marketed as a prequel. But even though he thinks it's a prequel, I don't know if I entirely agree. But thoughts on book two are very positive. I do think it's reading easier than book one. There is a Mata-sized hole in book two, but that's okay. That's okay because yeah, I'm enjoying book two a lot. This book's closer to its characters, way more personal and philosophical, like way more in their head and close to them. While Way of Kings,
Wrong
yeah,
series.
yeah, Grace of Kings, was like a drama playwright style.
Mm.
Well, this is closer, which it is different, but I'm enjoying it.
Actually, that's interesting that you bring up the playwright style because I was watching an interview that Ken Liu did with Patrick Leo on YouTube. Highly recommend that interview. I'll link it in the show notes. But at the beginning, Ken Liu did say that he was inspired by Wu Xiao, which is like a style of storytelling in like Chinese culture, which is very rooted in kind of like that play like style. So nice pickup on that. What about you, Seth, newcomer to this crew?
Yeah, I through the first half I liked it more than book one. Probably because of the slower thing and the more philosophical kind of feel to it. It's made me think a lot. So, like I finished the reading probably like 3 days ago, 2 days ago, and I don't think I've stopped thinking about it since.
Nice.
At least for the first two parts, I have adhered to our plan.
Don't you dare.
No, it's
What
good.
self-control.
I'm a character guy. I like famously I'm a Robin Hobb stan. Aren't exactly plot heavy books. So themes and character, yeah, themes and character matter a lot to me, and I'm just this book's a killer so far. We'll get into the
Nice.
weeds of it, but the back half of it is, I feel like I'm in danger emotionally. So
All right, Yetti. You're the only one who has read the series all the way through, so you know what's coming. But this is a reread for you. How is it?
Yeah, this will be my third time having read Wall of Storms. And it's, I kind of tell people like I think this is a perfect book. But through the first half, I think anytime I've recommended to people and they read it, they're a little dubious, honestly.
Mm,
I'm really excited you guys like it, but it's kind of unconventional in a sense. Like exciting parts. It's very political, just broadly. Um, but you know, I don't think this is spoilers, but we were talking about that education plays a big part. And for me, it's incredibly gripping, but I don't think everyone would feel that way. So when I say it's like a perfect book, I think it throws people off. But I am a sucker for stories that start to follow the lineage of characters that you fall in love with. And this book really gets into the weeds of that, meeting the type of new characters we do who kind of blossom into the main characters, and all the paths you can see they take. And you can even see the characteristics of them, just subtle moments throughout the first half where it's like, oh, that's, they're making those decisions. That's not very much like his father, or, things like that. Or this person is very much like their father. So, yeah, I mean, I love this book. I I do think the second half we're gonna have a totally, totally different conversation than what we're having this half. Like almost mind-blowingly different. And it was really interesting to hear Sean say there's a Mata-sized hole in this book, where it's like I'm just gonna hold him to that comment after when we get to the next half because it's and also the prequel thing, it does hold up because once you like read all four books, even after this one, I think Sean might bend a little bit on that,
Yeah.
because it feels like from here on out, this is like with the characters we have now and the story you will soon find, where the story goes. It's like, oh, this is what he really wanted to tell, but he needed that
mm,
base of kind of revolution, rebellion, and new leadership to kind of set the story in motion and kind of thrust it forward. But I mean, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I've third time through just as good. I mean, it's I don't get bored at all rereading this like I do maybe some other books.
wow. That's high praise. For myself, the second book is like almost 50% longer than the first book. Um, but this one, like, it does read very quickly. I mean, the first one also read pretty quickly. This one, I was a bit intimidated by how many pages we need to read in such a short amount of time. But honestly, once I got started, it was just, like, flipping through. I know you guys were saying in our group chat how, you were reading other books that are shorter and they felt longer. So, yeah. Ken Liu really has a way to tell a story. And so for me, it's I came into this book with some dread because of how the first book ended. And that dread is like it's still there. So I am so curious. It took so much willpower to not just flip the page for to just see the first sentence of part 3, you know.
I
So
did
I'm
do
very
that, to
curious.
be honest.
I was
You
so
did?
close.
Peter.
I was so
Oh
Yeah,
my
close.
god.
just the
Well,
first couple words.
no, guys, kick him off the
It
pod.
didn't. It didn't do
No
anything.
predictions for you. I will say, like when you're talking about his writing, we might have brought this up last episode, but I still feel like I love the way he writes these books, but I couldn't like read it back to back, or I couldn't read another author who does the same way. I get burnt out very easily on like his flashback style, where you're kind of getting in a groove with a chapter or characters or a timeline, and
Yeah.
then he does the short story years before, and then you learn a little bit back. I love it reading this, but I have a limit,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like I couldn't read multiple books like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that is our non-spoiler section as much as we can. We are diving into spoilers now. So that this is your warning. Okay, going into spoilers. So let's talk a little bit about the writing style. Since that's what Yeti brought up. There's a new character that gets introduced, right? Mimi, who gets renamed as Zomi. And the way that Ken Liu introduces us to her, and it does come with like, who her honestly, it's like her village, right? Her village gives the backstory of her father and her brothers and the societal like tension between the poor, the villagers, and those who have power, the kingdom, who kept sending these fishermen out to look for the prince that even though we're like, we don't really care about this prince, but because he's a prince, we have to go and try to find him. Um, all right. So getting into our spoiler talk. Yeah, so you mentioned Zomi, new character that was introduced, and the way that she was introduced was very much introducing her village, her father, mother, brothers, and how they had to basically all the men within this village were sent out to try and find and retrieve a prince that was basically a token that the king had sent this prince as a token on expedition. Uh, um, Unfortunately, the prince was not to be found, and Zomi's father and brothers never returned. So it's just her and her mother. I do think so. First, part 1 is longer. It's almost 300 pages long. So it is a bit longer than part 2. But I think also what may have contributed to the feeling of it being just slower to get through is the flashbacks and like the new character, like readjusting and learning about the new characters. Yeah. And
I just want to say, aren't the flashbacks exclusively Mimi slash Zomi in part one? Am I remembering that right?
yeah, I believe that is pretty much it. And it's telling her story in like bits, right? Um, and also this like really interesting and bizarre like dream but not dream of the turtle and the shark and the lightning and how she became like injured and has a bad leg. It was quite a fever dream like.
Yeah. I think Zomi's whole storyline is interesting in that it's kind of a setup for the education storyline or the testing thing. That's like a kind of lead up into that. Like she obviously starts poor and wants to move up and get into this class where she can make a difference in education and go in front of Cooney and things like that. But also, it's her storyline's important because her teacher, we find out, is Luanzia, who is kind of lost and feel in a time of peace, which is a big part of this first part of this book, a lot of characters don't know what to do or have ideas of what to do, and he is kind of doesn't feel like he has a purpose. And so finding Zomi was like a cool mashup between the two, where he found someone who's super bright that he can help. And I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but I kind of found the first introduction of Zomi, where she's in that bar and she's like sticking up for the
Yeah.
poor people and things like that. That Thera, Thera, I think is Cooney's oldest daughter's name, kind of sees her in admiration, and
Yeah.
says like, and
Hmm.
it very much mirrors, if you remember in the Grace of Kings, when Cooney first sees Luanzia try to attempt to kill the emperor, and has his admiration and kind of starts his journey for him. And I thought that was a really cool mirroring between all four of those characters. But
Yeah.
yeah, Zomi and Luan I think is a good chunk because it shows so much about the education part and learning and philosophy that this book gets into.
So what you're saying is Thera will be Empress.
There's a chapter in the book that would lead you to believe that.
That is very
Mirrors have a
true.
lot to do with this book, so
All right. So let's talk about the examination, like all the things that lead up to it, what it is, and a bit about what happened after. Spook, you said that you really like the education part. Do you want to
yeah.
expand on that?
Sure. As long as I remember everything I was saying. I really enjoyed kind of how the writing system was structured with the onologograms. I really enjoyed how he explained that structure. I know Ken Liu is like originally or at some point in his life, he's held a lot of hats,
Yeah.
different jobs in his life. He was a programmer.
Yep.
And as someone who went to school for programming, I kind of see a lot of that thought process in it. I know logograms are real kind of language and writing in our world. It's not that he created it, but I found kind of similarities with how he was explaining it in the world, at least from like an engineering perspective. Just really enjoying it, really connecting to it, and just seeing how his thought process was, and just going, programmer, I can tell, just based on all of that. But yeah, I think the logograms are really cool. I like the 3D aspect of it, where
Yeah.
there's details hidden where you can only really tell them if you're like feeling around it as well. Yeah, I love that part.
It is a bit challenging for me to imagine this writing style, especially since people are writing whole essays using it, and there are the judges who are reading all of these essays as well. So that's an area that I have a little bit difficulty with. Although I do see some like similarities with Chinese and like Mandarin, where when he was explaining to Zomi that, different people will speak the language differently, but when it's written, it's the same. And in Chinese, that's very much the case where the particular, like most spoken ones are Mandarin and Cantonese. And I can speak Mandarin and understand Mandarin. I cannot speak and cannot understand somebody who's speaking Cantonese, but if it's written, the majority of it, like, both of us would be able to understand. So that's,
Interesting.
yeah. And there's, like, all this history, which, by the way, we aren't gonna get into the real life politics and, like, any of that kinda discussion. Everything will be pertaining to the politics within the world that Ken Liu has created. And I mean, if we did read this series with the lens of the historical knowledge and the current day political climate, like there's so much there that could be explored, which is what's really cool about this series. And I think it will definitely stand the test of time. Like there will still be things that future generations can glean and get from it long after we're gone here.
Absolutely.
Sean, did you
Hey.
have anything you want to share about the examination?
I mean, while we're on the topic of Zomi,
Mm-hmm.
just real quick, I do think her backstory sets the stage for like her character and how it's developed and set up as a microcosm of a lot of the book overall and series overall. Like there's that question that she asks herself a lot, which is, it was the fate of the poor to toil and endure, wasn't it? And that kind of is the backbone for a lot of her personal ambition and just her personal thoughts on the world and like how she wants to tackle the world from there, like provide for her mother and get success from that. And just her backstory in general. There's a lot there that like speaks to the themes of the series as a whole. But for the examination itself, I mean, we like, and the reason I'm bringing that up too is because the examination, you bounce from the examination and into her backstory a lot, as we've mentioned. And I think that's not just a pacing choice, but it's also how Ken wants to tell the story, because there's things that the examination talks about, or there's ways that you should think about the examination that he wants to make you think about by stuff in her backstory. So yeah, not just a pacing choice. I think it kind of, it's how Ken wants you to think about everything. Those are basically my thoughts on examination. I mean, like the specific logistics of it, I don't have too many thoughts on.
Sure.
There's a question that Mimi, I'm gonna go back and forth between the names that she uses because my notes call her Mimi early on, and then
Okay.
Zomi later on. But so Zomi does ask a question: does the world follow a design that can be perceived? Is nature a model for society so that what is natural is also what is just? I think she poses that question to Luan Zia at some point. And I think it's an important question because a lot of ignorance perpetrated by characters in the series in leadership positions don't ask themselves that question. They take nature at face value and they strictly adhere to what nature shows them. And Zomi kind of having that engineering mind, that analogogram mind, is able to pick it apart a bit and get to the truth of matters. And I think that a lot of Cooney's inner circle also has that mindset. So I always thought that she would fit in well there as an advisor. Hasn't exactly been a straight path by any means, and she's really in the weeds right now. But I have high hopes for her. I thought her presentation at the examination was pretty bold and ambitious. I do enjoy that she wanted to propose the abolition of analogograms and classical anno in the examination altogether. I did love that.
So I do think there is quite a bit to unpack based on what you were talking about between how the examination and her backstory, that back and forth, was certainly a choice, not just for pacing. I think it, for me, it did bring this enrichment and better understanding, like the build up to her presentation. Because you see the, like, honestly, the execution of the examination. And although the outcome is honorable, and the intention with Cooney opening it up, you know, regardless of class, regardless of gender, like those are great intentions. But what Zomi shows and illustrates is it's not the equality that it's not only the equality that matters, it's also the equity. Where if you're from a poor village, if you're from a land where historically this learning is not the focus, because honestly, all you're trying to do is survive, right? It's really the wealthy who have the luxury. When she first encounters these like people just arguing and debating these things where it's like that's not going to feed your mouth, right? That's not going to feed your family. You have the luxury of debating and picking apart each other's like logic and reasoning. And she's just like fascinated. Like, I didn't realize that that could be a thing. Like, that would be tangible for me.
I mean,
Um,
yeah. I saw like a 1-to-1 with like just college, at least in America. Not to get too much. I don't want to get too much into current politics, but it's just like how expensive, college education is. I mean, it was like the same thing. If you don't have the means to do it, you could open it up to as many people as you want, any races, any genders, and it doesn't. It's irrelevant. I mean, if
yeah.
you don't have that opportunity or the means to even get there.
And honestly, it's not even college. Like, college is definitely,
Mm-mm.
like, a really, blatant example. I think there are even examples where just grade school,
Sure.
normal grade school,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, if you were lucky, um, you had the time and the support, to be able to do your homework, to be able to when you go to school, you can focus on learning. Well, and there are a lot of people who they don't even get that opportunity around the world, right? There are no schools for them. And second, even if they could go to school, that they don't have the luxury of really focusing their attention and dedicating their time and effort to the learning. So yeah. I think the other piece is with Zomi's backstory, we get to see she has a very encouraging teacher in Luanzia. And he was able to articulate to her, well, first of all, he was really patient. Two, he really encouraged her curiosity. And three, he allowed her to explore the different philosophies, explore the surroundings around her, and come to her own conclusions. Like he'll guide her in her exploration, but a lot of it is like, well, what do you think? Right? And going through the moralists, the incentivists, the patternists, the fluxists, like all of these different major schools thought and letting her come to her own conclusions. So it's another way to show like how important your support system is. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Seth, any thoughts you want to add?
Um, yeah, I am really moved by Mimi's character.
Yeah.
You know, I just found her entire story very moving. Obviously, it was a very deliberate choice by Ken Liu to make her not only poor and in this village, but also a woman. He's got a lot to say about, um, you know, in his world, the struggles of being an uneducated woman. Her mother, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, is you know, like a kind of shining example of how difficult
Mm.
that can be, how daunting it could be. She has lost her husband, her sons. Um, Her daughter is essentially maimed, or no, uh, has a lifelong injury, is uneducated, and I
But
can't
she's been able to
imagine.
survive. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, and she just keeps going, right? Like uh, she's incredible, and it was not surprising to me that at the examination, what Zomi was trying to do was lower the or erase the barrier of entry for women into
Yeah, lower the
uh,
barrier of entry.
yeah of of entry into education because she wanted women to participate, and I think she has a quote in there like you would double the pool of people you could pull from, right? And the point of these examinations, I mean, there's multiple points we kind of figure out through the story, but one of them is that Kunigara wants, he's trying to and has tasked his administration with creating a fair and impartial examination, which we can dissect how effective that was. But a part of that is because he wants the best people, the most qualified people for the job, right? And so Omi comes in as a young gal and has this very bold thing and says, like, you're not doing a good job, right? This is a terrible setup. And anyway, yeah, no, I find her character was by far my favorite sections of the first part.
I'll be honest with you, when I was in college, I tried to steer away from philosophy as much as I could because I hated exactly what you were seeing, or like what was depicted where DeFuro basically quelled the riot by sparking debate amongst the people that didn't make it to the end of the test, and they begin like debating and picking apart each other's like reasoning, and it's like basically circular argument. That's like my experience and impression of philosophy, um, especially when you're having like college students discuss philosophical ideas. But I do recognize now, like, there is a lot of value and benefit, especially when it's about critical thinking. And you are also evaluating something from different perspectives and really like expanding your mind and your empathy, honestly. Um, I don't avoid philosophy as much as I did before.
You brought up the mob, and just I realized too, the mob section showing up and the fire at like where Luanzia takes
Mhm,
Zomi,
mhm,
and they find the lava flower. Those chapters are like right next to each other, so it
Mhm.
mm.
just shows that like his pacing and like how he kind of wanted to intertwine the two stories was pretty intentional.
Yeah,
That's actually a
absolutely.
great call out. Yeah, because they fought the fire with more fire, right?
Mhm.
And so they fought the riot with more debate and
Yeah,
philosophy. Yeah, great call out.
thanks.
Oh,
I was proud of that one. That's why I got excited for a second.
alright, let's talk about Cooney's family. Yeti, do you wanna kick us off?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the big thing at the end of Grace of Kings is that, Cooney essentially backstabbed Mata because he was so in belief that he was the one that was better for Dara. And we pick up with him and his family, him and Gia, essentially in control. And he has, like I said, 4 kids. And I just thought it was kind of riveting, other than the education stuff, to see the politics of who's going to kind of succeed Cooney. Uh, in this place, because it's always being talked about. Not that he's old, but this stuff kind of comes up. You have his oldest son, Theta Tika, or whatever his name is, and Thera. What's his oldest son's name? Why am I
Timu.
blanking?
Timu.
Timu
Timu.
Timu, yeah. Timu and Thera, who
Off
are
the website.
Gia's, who are Gia's, and then Rasana's younger boy, Faro.
Firo?
Firo.
Yeah.
And then he has a youngest daughter from someone who died in childbirth,
Yeah, Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. And so to see all their personalities, I thought was kind of my favorite part of the book.
Mhm.
His oldest son is kind of doesn't really have the smarts that Cooney does, that we knew in love with Cooney, the like street smarts and quick understanding. He's very into Con Fiji and the royal. They all love him, but and then Thero, we obviously get to see, is kind of like his successor, where it's like, oh, this is like Cooney reincarnated uh,
Mhm.
Yep.
as his daughter.
Yeah.
His
Confuci is an ass, she says.
right, yeah. Um, his The other son is like in love with Mata and like war and like the stories of old and like the myths and legends and things like that. And then you have his youngest, who's just kind of cute and fun at this point in time, but is an
Yeah.
interesting arc. But to see all that, and then G and Rasana kind of politicking about their respective sons who should take over, it was just kind of, I don't know. I just couldn't get enough of that kind of stuff and just ate it up. And then Cooney kind of just being this, um, still Cooney as king, but I think, as Spook alludes to, kind of is blinded by some things. In particular, his love of Gia. I would say that
Sure.
it's sometimes frustrating that he doesn't see some things. Um, but also for his love for his children, and when he gets one-on-one moments with Thera in the garden, and then Luanzia comes up and kind of he alludes to like, oh, this is the best choice to be my heir, who was a girl, and Luanzia is like, oh, I always respected you, Cooney. You always surprised me. But um, so yeah, I don't know. I just, as much as the education stuff was a thriving force in this book, really to me, and why I think he says this is like the real start of the book, is because we meet his children and they really plant the seeds of where the story's going with all of them.
Mhm. Another sad thing about Timu is how it's brought up. Excuse me. It's brought up a couple times where Cooney's like, "It's a shame that I was away from Timu for so long because of the war, and it kind of affected their relationship because he doesn't feel that personal attachment to him. He's always trying to impress Cooney, and it's like more of a like he thinks of Cooney more as like his boss more than like a father figure.
Yeah.
Yes, that part's sad.
And
It's not Timu's fault.
he's also like, as on this reread, I kind of picked up. He's also kind of like meek, kind of in a way that Kryn is the
Mhm.
Cooney's one friend who like sleeps
Oh
with
yeah.
Gia,
Like
and you
father,
wonder,
like son, maybe?
yeah, he kind that kind of rubbed off more on him than
And
Cooney ever did. It's kind of like a nurture nature thing almost.
I'm pretty sure Lou pointed that out, where it's like Timu finds Oka Krim more of a father than
Yeah.
Mm,
Cooney, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I read that, I went, oh no,
right.
Yeah.
felt so bad.
It was funny when Timu sent the letter and he's talking to Rasana as he reads it, and he's like, "This guy sucks. This kid sucks. He's so dull. I hate the way he talks."
Like he's falling asleep while it's being read to him and
Yeah.
whatnot. Yeah.
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 I would say on the topic of Timu, I like that it's kind of a consequence for the choices and decisions Cooney made in the previous book,
Mhm.
Sure.
where not everything is perfect because of what happened. Like he doesn't get his perfect family. He has his first son not really know him as a father. And I
Mhm.
kind of like that, where it's like, yeah,
Yep.
he faces consequences for his own actions, which he didn't really have many consequences in the first book. He just kind of succeeded all the time.
Yeah. It's kind of like I don't know if you want to call it subversive, but it really is this is, if you just read the first book, right? That could be a standalone in itself and can have more of a he could have made it like a happy ending. And,
Yeah.
the poor rose up and they overthrew the empire and they won. They all live happily ever after. But that's not the story that Ken Liu wanted to tell. He wanted to tell the grittiness of what happens when you do overthrow um, such an entrenched political power. What kind of future are you really going to build, and how are you going to build it? And it's not always going to go according to plan. Um, it's very realistic, sometimes a little too realistic, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I do feel bad because even Soto, right? The Soto, the lady who basically like took care of Timu, she even says to herself like, "Look, I can only handhold you so much. Like if you can't figure out how to
Mm.
be more um what is even the
Port
right
savvy.
more savvy, yeah. Like the there's not really much of a future for you. At least, in a leadership role.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Seth, any thoughts about the children?
Um, yeah, I the chapter we were talking about where Cooney's talking with Thera in the garden. I thought was just a great moving moment, you know. Uh, but also you realize Cooney is kind of playing the long con, right? Like he's really trying to change the perception of women in power. He talks about how Gia and Risana, uh,
Mhm.
he's allowed them to be by him in court when he's overseeing, you know, political matters and stuff like this and these examinations. And so I got the feeling that the education stuff he's pushing was really, and certain other, kind of breaking some of these traditional norms was really to set Thera up as his heir. Like I really felt he was pretty settled on it, and that he just hadn't communicated that to Gia and Risana, which makes what I feel like is going to happen that much more tragic. And I think what he's doing is a noble thing, but they're just, the lack of communication is a killer. I like how different he made each of the kids, but in such a believable way. You know,
Mhm.
I don't feel like they're caricatures or one note. And I feel for Timu. It's hard not to. Like he's a good guy. He tries really hard. He wants to be accepted, and he's just kind of a dweeb. And like, and that's fine. Like and it should be fine. But Cooney's having to look at this not only as his dad, but as the emperor, right? And say,
Right.
look, I want the realm to have stability and to have the best person for the job, right? That's a huge theme of this first couple sections, right? best person for the job, who's the most qualified to do it, they should do it, right? Like in that way, I think Cooney's kind of taken himself out of it and saying like, look, I don't care that Thera is not a man, right? I don't care that that's never been done before. And he's thinking about how do I change the perception of women in power,
Yeah.
and he realizes that it's not going to be a quick thing. It takes time to affect societal change like that on a big scale.
Yeah, I think like you even said it, like a big theme is the long-term health of Dara. Like I said it last episode, like this book, I think, or the series is like Dara's the main character. And it's so interesting the ideas, what people think is the best long-term for Dara. Cooney has ideas, Zomi has ideas, and more importantly, in this book, as we allude to, the person that really has ideas for the long-term health of Dara is Gia.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you know, it's interesting. Everyone like think goes to evil, and the stuff she does is definitely, I would just say, very complex in her choices. But she says it over and over again. She's doing this. No one understands why she's doing this, but she knows it's right, and it's just. I just think that's so interesting. What we're reading is like, what are you talking about? But in her mind, she is like set on something. What that is, we don't know, but she is
Right.
set clearly on something, and these steps have to be done. Yeah, it's brutal.
I
One of
have
my
a
questions.
theory. Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, I was gonna say one of my questions is like if Gia knew that Cooney was considering Thera as his top option, would she be like this involved? Like, would she be okay with that? Would she not be okay with that? I don't know.
Well,
I
Cooney
think
said he.
would love it.
I don't know. Well, Cooney said he didn't. That's when he was in the garden with Luan afterwards. He said the reason he's not bringing up Thera as a option because it would endanger her, because he doesn't think everyone would respond to that. Even Gia, I think he alludes to Gia has her own ideas of what should be, and is like kind of bullheaded on that. So I was thinking that too, but I think her pride with the dweeb is too
Timu.
much. Sorry.
Well, so here's the question that I think of in response to your question, Sean, is I mean, Gia's not blind. She sees Timu's weaknesses, and she sees Thera because she was overhearing a conversation that Thera was having, and she recognizes Thera's strengths. So the question is like, why isn't Gia trying to do more to make way for her daughter? Or maybe, and this is like the theories from Panda, maybe she is, but in a like roundabout way? Question mark.
Maybe.
Not really sure.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. That is my theory as well. Is that she's big theory? She's trying to create this war so that Thera can end up on the throne.
So maybe she's taking out the people who she thinks would be the biggest obstacles
Yeah.
for Jira. So if we think about
Oof.
like Jin, right? Jin established herself as queen. Jin gets to wear her sword into the palace, right? Is Jin going to be okay like with, reporting up to Thera, or do you think she'll be like, "Well, if you're going to be empress, then I'm going to be queen and I'm going to, basically say that we're independent." Maybe. I don't know. But there's also like, well, is it because Thera is Gia's daughter and Jin and Rasana are closer? And so then they would like ally up and like rise up against, Thera. So like these are the things that I'm now thinking about.
Quick
I,
question. See if you guys remember. Whose idea was it for Timu to go to Gajira?
She
what,
is.
what Gia's,
So that kind of ties in where it's like, was she trying to get rid of Timu so that whenever she enacted her plan to take Jin, what happens to Timu? Does he end up staying in Gajira? Because at the end, we don't know what's going on with Timu. We know that
he's in a relatively
something is happening to him.
So this is very important. So the reason she did this, and she alluded to it essentially.
Sure.
Her where she sent other boy's name
Hero.
Firo. He was sent to quell rebellions
Mhm.
in
Yes.
theoretically a more dangerous area,
Right.
right? because that could put you in more danger. Where Timo was sent farther away in
Right.
a place that was farther away from danger. Like
Kasu,
that real
right?
yes, where you could learn and things like that. But that's that was her choice. And if you read the
Yeah.
last chapter,
Something
that would
has
allude
Something's going on.
that might not have went to plan. But that was her thinking is why she did that.
Sure.
Right. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of circling also around the rebellion stuff, which we'll get to. But now that we've gotten some of our theories out into the open, does anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to formally nominate Yetti for an Oscar for keeping a straight face during this prediction theory section.
I haven't been looking at him at all.
I will say when I was reading Grace of Kings, and I can say this because you can go read this after we get done this podcast episode. But there's a chapter in Grace of Kings, and if you remember the chapter, it's a letter. It's letters that Gia and Cooney write back to each other when
Yeah.
they're separated, and it literally tells you what is going to happen in the second half of this book, or really allude to it.
Interesting.
And if you read that over again very carefully with something that is said there, and it's sprinkled, it's actually sprinkled a few times in this book too. But I remember reading that. I'm like, oh, he's been setting this up since since the very beginning. He knew what was going to happen.
He has
And
some great moments of foreshadowing, even just in the first half of this book to the middle of the book. I thought,
Yeah.
with Zomi and some other characters. So yeah, I mean, I believe it is. This would be a really interesting series to reread. I
Yeah.
know we're not even halfway through it, but
He's
it's
definitely what are the two terms? Planters and
architects and gardeners. Yeah.
architects and gardeners.
Yeah.
He has this set up, and like I confirm when it's all said and done, like everything's written for a reason. He's not like finding himself in these books. Like he knows exactly what chapters he's writing when.
So what's interesting is in that interview that I mentioned before with Patrick Leo, Ken Liu shared that he knew what the ending of the series was going to be, like 10 years before he wrote it. So I think that really helps him. And he also knew what the fates of the children were going to be before he even wrote it. So I think it's like quite helpful in terms of like him marching towards a vision and then like planning out how he would get there.
I do find it interesting. Like, we're probably never gonna know, but if you're right, Panda, and Gia's plan is to have Thera on the throne, and that is also Cooney's plan. Like, if he had looped her in, he could have maybe steered her ambition.
So I have a theory about that.
In a more positive light.
Communication, it's key in a marriage.
Yeah,
It is key. However, I think that Gia, she's taking on all of this burden for herself. She's being the bad guy, quote unquote, right? But part of it is she doesn't think that Cooney would be able to do what is needed in order to get the outcome that she believes is what the country needs or the land
She's
needs.
right.
Yeah.
Because if you
right.
if you think about what she
You don't
said
know what she
about
wants.
trust and loyalty, right? She blatantly says that like trust it's too soft. Like you can't it's not solid enough of a foundation. And so for her, Jin she's seen it. Cooney let Jin name herself queen. Cooney lets Jin be the exception to bring her sword into the palace, right? And she observes these tensions that's happening in the court. And so she just basically is kind of like, Cooney, I don't think you have what it takes to do what's needed, so I'm going to do it for you. That's my theory.
Which is
Yeah, because
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just say, whoever said it before, how she doesn't want the threat of the other children to be there at all. Like she wants solidified there on the throne. No way for Timu or Fyro to rise up. Like if she thinks that's important, then I see why she has to do what she's doing and why she wouldn't want to loop in Cooney.
Watch us be completely wrong though.
Well, she doesn't just want the threat to her kids gone. She actively gets on Cooney about she wants him to consolidate power to the emperor, right? Essentially,
Yeah.
you have all these lords of
The nobles.
Daru, the nobles, who have standing armies, right?
Yeah.
And
Good
and
point.
that's a big part, right? She is like, you do not have the military, right? They have the
Yeah.
military. And so they have the power. And if they ever realize they have the power
Yeah.
and are not in agreement with you, that's going to be a problem.
Right.
And she's right, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's right about that much, at least.
Hey, she's winning us over. Look at this.
Well, you
I've always been a
can't,
fan.
especially as a government entity in this world, right? Like we've already seen a lot of political turmoil in a book and a half.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot keep all these lords happy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Cooney can, but could his kids, right?
Mhm.
Or and the likelihood of that is zero. And I think she's being a realist, at least about that much. And Cooney kind of does have his head in the sand, saying like, no, these are my friends. He's got that kind of charm. Like, oh, we we were in the rebellion together, and blah 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 blah. And so in that way, I see it. But you can strip power from nobles over time in such a way that maybe they're not even aware of it, right? And in Cooney's way, at least with the education, I have to think is more of the long way, right? He's willing to be patient. And she clearly is done being patient.
She doesn't want to leave as much to chance.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see it already. I mean, a lot of this is life in peacetime, right? And how people, I think, anytime get restless. And you said like, oh, Cooney relies a bunch on, oh, we did this during the revolution. Like we have a bond there. But we see at the end of this part that someone who saw his kids grow up and, that had him on their lap, he betrayed Cooney and got talked into easily rebelling based on his pride. And obviously Gia is, doing stuff like
Kind
that.
of.
But he still chose to rebel. And he's still, and that, he had that beheading scene was like brutal, where he's like calling for Cooney and like saying how personal, we did all this together. But it's kind of, to Gia's point, that trust and loyalty, I mean, it just takes you so far. It's not something to base a civilization on, a successful, flourishing one. That's human emotions and human nature will take over, whether it's greed, jealousy, things like that. And even your best of friends will kind of turn, and if they think that's what they're earned or what they're deserved. And I mean, we saw it in Grace of Kings. We saw it with Cooney did it for Mata, and Luan decided that decision was too. I mean, friendship and things, if you think something is right for the country or whatever, and you have your beliefs, that it loyalty and trust just isn't going to do it.
Which I think it gets to like that part's tragic. And obviously he sends someone to try and get Jen out of
the prison,
of the situation she's in. She's in prison essentially, right? She's a political prisoner. And Jen has all this pride and is like, nah, man, like I'm gonna fall on the sword. You made this bed, right? Like, which Jen, you're stupid, but
I get it.
I get it.
I get her decision, because I don't want to get on a soapbox about Cooney, but he just won't make up his mind about things, and he won't actually stand up for what he believes in. Like, he doesn't want her to die, but he's not really doing anything vocal about it. He's sending somebody to whisk her away so that she can live the rest of her life in solitude.
I read that different. I read that as Cooney is starting to question Gia, right? Like there's some cracks there. And,
sure.
And he is probably telling her that's the plan, right? But I don't think that's really his plan. If Jen comes back and tells Cooney, dude, Gia set us up, this is crazy, and he's already, clearly he's already feeling some type of way about it to have even attempted this, plan.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there's a lot to critique about Cooney, but I don't know that Gia or us are giving him enough credit for some of the things he's thinking about. And then this ties into a scene that almost had me crying in the end of book 2, but it was where actually it ties into Jen as well, but Gia has planted Zomi to be in Jin's province, helping her, right? And we have these a couple chapters of reflection where Zomi's like, I'm really making a difference here, right? I am I'm teaching these women how to write and to read, and Gia listens to my input, and we're making positive change, and like I can stand on the things that I'm doing here, right? Like
Mhm.
all the stuff I've done to get here has been worth it, right? And then a couple chapters later, she's put in a situation where she has to
Betray.
Force
betray
betray, yeah.
Jin or go back to obscurity in a life of poverty and or death, right?
And her
And
mom.
and
Right.
her mom.
She
And
doesn't
so
have to betray. Yeah. She
yeah,
has a choice.
she has a choice, and
Yeah,
she
yeah, yeah.
she chooses a very human, very real thing to betray Jen, and I think it was pretty expertly foreshadowed with the scene where she actually saves Luan, and she goes, the people I care
Mm,
about are all that matters to me, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
remember, Luan's kind of put off by that, and he's like, I don't think
Yeah.
that's the way you should approach life, right? Like that's going to get you in trouble. And then here we are,
Mm.
a
You
book
dog.
later, and she, yeah. And it was, I mean, that all came crashing down for me in that section, and I was just like,
I
like
love that. Oh my god. Yeah.
I get it. I get why she made that call,
Yeah.
but God, it's heartbreaking
Right.
because, how do you live with that going forward, right?
Well, how do you live with it is
Just
the
you wait.
promise that she made, that Zomi made to Jin, to take care of Jin's daughter,
Yeah.
right?
Which,
That was her justification.
but man,
Yeah.
like, and that's
It's
the,
like, sorry, you can keep going.
oh yeah, this is my last thing. It's just, this is the thing that I'm loving about this book is these characters feel so real, you know. Ken Liu, if he keeps this up, is going to enter my pantheon of greatest character
Yeah,
writers
yeah,
because
Basically.
yeah, because these are such, you're so frustrated. I just want to throw my book across the room, and I'm like, ah, right, like palpable frustration for
Yeah.
these decisions, but I can see why they made them, right? They're believable, they're
Yeah.
human. If I put myself in that situation, I don't know that I would have done any different, right? I want to believe I'd take a different path, but it's just a masterclass to me so far in character, and he does this not just with Zomi, but with Luan and Jin and even Gia, right? Like Darth Vader Gia out there, just
You came into this episode, like, hating Gia's guts.
well,
Yeah.
you're changing my mind a little, Panda, but it's just
I think what she's doing is despicable,
Yeah.
but I
yes,
respect her actions. And if we are correct in our theory, I think she's just a genius. It's great.
Mm.
I mean, she might be playing 4D chess. We don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
She might be a tragic character.
well, it's yeah, and this feels like it's going to be a tragedy. Like I mentioned it in the chat, and I'll mention it here. Like this feels like it's got Shakespearean tragedy written all over it.
The
Mm.
Like no
dominoes
one's
have been set up.
yeah, no one's
Something's
going to be a
happening.
winner at the end of this. Dark, like
No
Yeti,
happy
you look
and
so smug.
yeah,
I just
I
I literally can't
know.
wait for you guys to read the second half of this book. Like it's
I,
I literally can't. I'm like shaking. It's
Uh,
I'm
uh,
just I just know I'm in emotional
yeah.
turmoil is coming, and I'm in peril, and
Yeah.
I'm not okay.
Seth,
yeah.
Seth, because you're also reading The Crippled God right now,
Yeah, yeah.
I am so sorry for you. You're gonna need, like, you might need some therapeutic.
Therapy has already been scheduled. Yeah, we're
Okay.
It's all
Very
ongoing.
good.
Um, Sean, you had something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, not only did Zomi promise to take care of Jin's daughter, but also she was like, and if I make this choice this way, this puts me in the best position to eventually help Jin and try to, save her or put her in a better position. So I have hope that she'll be able to do that. But I also wanted to pose one question. This is a good time to do it. But how do we feel about where Jin ends up with respect to like, Gia orchestrated a lot of this situation and manipulated the feelings of a lot of people involved. But do we think Jin had any agency to not be treasonous at any point?
Yes.
Or was it all airtight for Gia?
No,
She had
I
plenty
think
of opportunity.
yeah. I think this is kind of the beauty of what Ken Liu has created is that at all these points, the characters being manipulated had the choice to do something different. sure, they were being persuaded to make certain decisions. There were, people who were definitely on Gia's side who were being incentivized, right, to encourage certain outcomes. But at the end of the day, it was very, very much she is just playing to what those characters like internal like what they were already feeling and thinking and just giving them opportunities to really show who they are, I think.
Yeah,
I think
I would
a
agree.
lot. I think a lot of things in this book. If I had not really criticism, but I think everything does go Gia's way a little bit, but it is believable. Like it all kind of is in a believable fashion. In regards to Gin, I mean, she had choices and won, and she multiple times made the wrong, even small decisions, like when they're all talking at court and she doesn't address Gia in her proper form, it's a sign of disrespect. Like multiple times, Luan's like, "Gin, what are you doing? Like your pride is getting in your own way." She doesn't. Again, with those two rebel leaders went to her. She could have, it was
Right.
she kept them and hosted them. Like that was a pivotal decision that she just because she found out that maybe Gia had something to do with it. It doesn't matter. I mean, honestly, they were still rebels. She could have handled it differently. That would have set everything in motion. So she had those decisions. She's the one who is insulted that Cooney doesn't ask for her help when the rebellions come up. Whether she's right or not, she still takes that personally and doesn't
She could have
communicate it properly.
asked at a minimum,
Anything,
right? Like, "Yo,
anything
dude, need some help?"
offered. And also to Cooney's fault, he's an idiot. Where he's like, "Oh, I didn't
Right.
think she'd want to fight her old friend." I mean, that's one of his bungles too,
Mhm.
and that's where I mean. Sometimes it feels like everything was going right for Gia, but
Sure.
Kin's totally responsible for where she ends up. Even to the like what Wombat said. Even when Daff comes and gives her this option, that is her choice that she is making to saying, "I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not sullying my legacy by hiding." Cooney cannot do any half measures. If he wants to go through with it, he needs to do it, and that's her choice. I mean, she has all the right in the world to do it, but that is her choice. And I would just say that continues. She makes choices continuously that might frustrate people, but she's I don't feel bad for her at all. I mean, I do feel bad for her. That sucks, but I she is consciously making these choices.
Yeah. All right. That was a lot. So let's talk about the rebellion. Um,
Yes,
I think yeah.
The
What'd you
cult
say?
of Mata Zindu.
The
love
cult of
it.
Mata Zindu.
The hegemon.
And I think there's actually quite a bit of parallel here. Like Gia is just really good at like she's very insightful, like what people's motivations are, how she can push their buttons, and the fact that she basically engineered a rebellion while also having somebody else engineer a rebellion is just wow. Um what a mind. But yes. So the rebellion, um, basically it all hinged upon these magic mirrors, quote unquote, right? Where when the light shines through, it projects this real lifelike image of Mata with the words, was it Kuni Garu must die? Um, which, you know, uh
Sounds like Mata.
right. Um and honestly, it kinda there's so many layers to this, and I wish we could, like, talk about all of it, but, like, how the 2 rebel like, they used to be Tiro kings, right? How they were able to convince so many people and trick them, and just the way that when they were describing how they did it was so manipulative as well, and it's it's so frustrating where it's like, "Hey, can't you see that you're being duped?" Um, but yeah.
Not to I never thought sorry. I never thought that once living in today's world. That made way too much sense to me
And then
today.
you
Most
also
believable part of the
consider
book.
the smoke part, right? Because they're kind of being drugged at the same time.
Yeah, there was also some,
So
hallucinogens.
I think it's very believable.
Uh,
I will say something that mirror device that's created that it's mostly science really. Like as
Mhm.
right.
much as this is a fantasy book, that is like like the biggest calling card I think of the series going forward. He is so good at creating these cool he says that are actually proven to be true. Like he does the science and the math on them so that they could actually be created, that he puts into these worlds that actually have effect on the story. And I love those mirrors and how characters slowly figure out how they work, and then how Thera
Mhm.
figures it out and uses it to, you know, save the situation
Change
to an
it.
extent. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
almost like, one of our members, Discord members, Kipton. I feel like he would love this series from book 2 onwards because of this stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And people who
Yeah.
really like technology and science and stuff like that. It's really fun.
It was
Yeah.
cool how Tututika was like, think of light as a wave, and then Thera was able to
Right.
take that and run with it from there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Thera's
Um,
wicked smart.
like what we were saying before, Sean, you pointed out about the fire, fighting the fire with fire, fighting the students with their own logic, but
Mhm.
also fighting the cult with their own magic mirror
Yeah.
device.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It's literally well, literally and metaphorically like putting a mirror up to them.
Oh.
There was this isn't rebellion centered, but it's something I was just sitting here thinking about. We have these pesky gods like kind of
Yes.
around, and there's a scene where Thera and Farah have snuck out to the lake,
Right.
right?
Love this scene.
And they're hanging out, and they're approached by this, impossibly beautiful woman that we know is a goddess, right? The goddess
Right.
of the lake. And the kids start heading back to town, and then another god shows up, and they're conversing for a second, and she's basically like, I want to make her the next, is it Kikimoni, or what's her name from the
Kikomi.
first Kikomi from the
Gombi.
first book.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really ominous, right? At first, you're like, "Oh, that's nice," and then I was like, "Wait a second, her story was tragic
Tragic.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really terrible." And she's been brought up a few times in this story, right? Where I think it was Thera saying, like, her legacy is not what they're painting it to
Right.
be, right?
Mhm.
And that's not who she was, right? She was really far thinking and things like that. And
She
so
loved her
anyway,
people. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that was a little nugget of foreshadowing that Ken was trying to hit us with, but I felt very uncomfortable, which is a theme for me. The first half of this book is just a lot of discomfort, but these
I
gods are definitely looming and affecting the story in these ways, and he's really kind of subtle about it sometimes.
Yeah.
You kind of forget that they're there sometimes, but they matter.
I wanna believe that Thera is what Kikomi's arc should have been. I wanna believe that it's, like, the breaking of the cycle and it's the correction, of that tragedy.
I aspire to be that optimistic.
We'll see what
I do,
happens.
I do love that Thera was, had a hunch and was trying to suss out Kikomi's true character arc. Like that.
Mhm.
That's my queen right there.
Mhm. It's impressive
Yeah.
that only a teenager could put that together. No one else, no other scholars might have thought that up, and she's just like,
Right.
but
Well, I would I
He's
would
gonna be
s
a girl teenager.
I would say that, they weren't looking for it. They
True.
were very much they have their own biases and very easy for them to believe that,
Mm.
um, "Oh, she was in love with Mirana." Um, actually, I do wanna say something here because I was having a conversation, in real life with somebody at a party, and they were telling me about how they were so sick of reading these, like, fantasy books with
Oh boy.
like strong, prominent female characters and their motivations and like the ending of them was all surrounding like a man or a relationship, like a love relationship. And now that I've gotten this far in this book, I'm like, I just want to shove this book in their hands, be like, go read this series because I think what is really nice about, what we're seeing with these female characters is it's not about it's not necessarily just about their relationship with a man, or looking for love or whatever. It is very much about things beyond that, where it's like whether that's how to be a good leader, how to take care of people, etc. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the poor reviews on Goodreads for Grace of Kings had that as like a complaint that the women characters weren't
Mm.
did center around a man and
Sure.
weren't really fleshed out. And I remember just thinking like, hey, pump the brakes, just wait. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like one of the top series ever for women. But yeah, so
Yeah, I was
I
going to bring
agree.
that up too. How we had that discussion on the one recording because now it's like Thera's being bolstered up to be queen or empress, and Zomi's character arc in general. It's just funny that that was even like that people think that, and we had any hesitancy because
Well,
yeah,
if you think about it, all the main characters, if it not that they're the main characters, but who got the most to do in this first part, Zomi, Gia, and Thera. I mean, really. I mean,
and
even
Jin, good amount of Jin.
yeah, it's a solid amount of Jin at the end. I mean, Cooney's kind of like a secondary character. It feels like,
He is.
in this book. So I mean, I guess you get a decent amount of Luan, but those three are the ones that really kind of your center the story so far.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, well, we've got a Luan size Chekhov's gun,
Oh yeah.
waiting in this story.
It's
He is
definitely true.
he is
I,
He
on
is 1,000,000% coming back with immortals or whatever from another land. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
My theory is that he's going to be Palpatine.
Whoa.
What do you?
A lot of,
Can you explain
Star
this
Wars,
metaphor?
a lot of
Yeah,
Star Wars metaphors. Except
you know, I
you just
Luan,
watched the
I feel
original
like has
trilogy.
been questioning the Dandelion dynasty, his role in it, his things like that, and I don't know. I just have a feeling
Interesting.
that maybe he travels, becomes disillusioned, is like, I'm gonna come back and do it better or something. I don't know.
So you guys don't think he's dead? I mean,
No,
many
No.
people have tried to make that voyage and they never come back.
no, that's
He's not gonna
he's not
die.
dead. He's
Is
not
that Prince gonna come back and be like, the throne is mine? Another player.
Dun dun dun.
Honestly,
dead. Yeah,
I go ahead.
oh no, I think there was a section in this right where he's talking about or ruminating on the fact that he felt like maybe he made the wrong decision, like he backed the wrong guy.
Well,
Luan?
Yeah,
He
he's
wishes
the
for
one
Mata.
that told Cooney to betray Mata.
Mhm.
Remember?
Yeah.
yeah, he is, and that's why I think it's interesting, right? Like he is having some kind of thoughts about it, and I remember reading that and thinking like,
Mm.
Ken is deliberate enough as an author that this is not a throwaway line, right? That's my thought.
That's a good point. I did like the line where Luan's talking to Cooney. I think this is when Cooney mentions Thera being his top candidate for the throne. And then he says, what was it? Luan was reminded once again how people had always underestimated Cooney, including even himself sometimes.
Mm.
So I think he just needs to be reminded that he picked the right horse.
I think he did. I mean, given what we know about Mata, I think he did.
Yeah, especially the short time Mata was ruling Dara and how kind of horrible that was for everyone but him.
Yeah.
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 Okay, I know we've been going for a while, so I want to make sure we wrap up soon. I did want to so some of the things that like themes, major themes in this first half. So we talked about trust and loyalty, and honestly, like the juxtaposition with self-preservation. Um, those two seem to go hand in hand a lot. There's also the whole meritocracy element of this with the examination. We talked about like the equality versus equity. Um, there's also two other things. I mean, it's four things, but they're like coupled together. There's modernity and progress, and then there's diplomacy versus manipulation. So I think, at least what Ken Liu has said is that this whole series is about the modernization of a civilization. And we're literally seeing the growing pains of that progress. And I don't think we have enough quite yet to really like talk about it. We've seen some things where it's like in this section it was talked about like the first succession is that wall of storms for any new regime. and they're trying to navigate through this first succession, and that the modernity and progress of what we already talked about is trying to level that playing field for the citizens, and Cooney really like running an experiment of like, here are the nobles, and here are the like lords who've been given the ability, the privilege to govern, as opposed to just inheriting it, and seeing like how they each of them um like comes out, what lessons there are to be learned from that. I don't know if anybody else has things that they want to chime in about modernity and progress.
You guys ever watch Succession?
No, I
No.
can't.
Yeah,
Not yet. No.
yeah. It's
That's my only comment.
It's too
Some
much drama.
similarities. That's true.
Well, yeah, I'll say Panda is totally on the right track with that, and that this is about progress in building a society that's functioning and healthy and modernizing it as you go along. Um, yeah, and I think what's interesting is that it's never gradual, and a lot of times there's side quests in the sense that you cannot predict what's gonna, like anything, even in a presidency or any type of leadership role. You cannot predict what's going to happen next. You can have a plan and you can see that through, and like, I know what I have to do. But even in this part with the rebellion, Cooney's best friend rebelled. He didn't, that wasn't on his one of his worries. He didn't think that would be something that would come up, and it kind of derails everything that you have going. You have to be able to adapt, and people have to be able to adapt, and it's hard. And to move forward, you have to account for that, and it is a long, long progress. And I just, you should just keep that in mind, I guess, going
Well,
forward.
so if you think about it, like the most pivoting moment in like recent human history is the Industrial Revolution, right? Like how quickly things changed because of that. And then you have the digital transformation, how quickly, just in the span of like my lifetime, right? I grew up with dial-up internet, right? And now there's Wi-Fi. Um, just like, I know, dating myself. Um, but just like how quickly things can change. And I think, it does start off slower, but then once you have that momentum and it builds, then things just go faster and faster. Which that's like a whole nother topic of like, well, what is the end game? What's it gonna look like, 50, 100 years from now? Anyway, um, but yeah, I think what's really interesting is how Ken Liu portrays that kind of change in human history in
I
this
do think that's
fictional
a
world.
valid question, though, Panda. Like, as readers, when you're reading it, like thinking, what is the end game? Like,
Yeah,
even if it's 50 years down the road, is it Cooney's grandchildren? Like, I mean, I think because that's what the characters are thinking, our main characters. Um, just even to think as a story, where do you think it would end up satisfyingly? Is it just a personal story about Cooney and his children? It's
mm,
what would you want for, even if you think back at the start of whatever country you lived in, hopefully the ones that are doing well, like 100 years before, what did they envision? What did they want it to
right.
be? They wanted to still be around, functioning. And I think, I just think that's a good idea to keep in mind. Just think about like what, you know,
Yeah, that's my
101-year-old
main
Cooney.
takeaway from Panda bringing up this discussion point. That's like, yeah, my main takeaway is something I'm going to think about a little more. I mean, I'm always thinking like, how's the book gonna end? How's the series gonna end? But I'm gonna think about it a little differently. We'll see how it goes.
And I mean, I don't think necessarily like there is a perfect answer, right? And
Hmm.
I think just this series so far, we've seen just how complicated and how many competing motivations and priorities and like realities, honestly. So many different people, right? Each person has a different reality. You perceive things, people, your surroundings also differently based on, who you are, what your upbringing is, what you're exposed to. And it's very complicated, which actually leads me to that second piece of diplomacy versus manipulation. And here, so far, we've seen a lot of manipulation, and not a ton of diplomacy. We talked
Agreed.
about the communication, the miscommunication, just like not
Yeah.
having,
Yeah.
like being able to speak transparently and honestly for fear of like being vulnerable, right? Um, and this is my soapbox. Um, in my time, especially in like workplace, personal life, like what I have found is that transparency and honesty. Obviously, you need to be respectful, um, but transparency and honesty are so important. You can cut out so much BS, so much strife, and like honestly, time wasting by just being clear, right, on what you mean, what needs to get done, what is the objective, and career advice from Panda. Know your audience, and tell them your message in a way that audience can understand. So an example would be like, hey, you're talking to somebody who is the person that's doing the thing every day, right? Doing the task every day. The conversation you're going to have with them versus like your manager or a CEO or like a VP are going to be very different because they have different um, responsibilities, different motivations. They care about different things. And so knowing who your audience is and being able to craft, especially a concise message. Don't be like Timu, who wrote like 10 pages of something. A concise message. That is a really important skill set to have,
See,
just in general.
the thing
Always
is,
felt the same. You got to code switch. When I
yeah,
served at a restaurant, that's like what I learned.
Yeah,
but the thing is, in this story, Gia knows that advice and is totally using that to her advantage.
sure.
Talking to
Yeah.
everyone, and playing to their wants and their fears or and she knows exactly, even Kogu Yellow, about like the spy network and saying, hey, he talked her language. You want more funding? I mean, you got to show that, there's more strife going on. And he's like, that makes sense. I mean, she knows
Yeah, right.
exactly how to play so many people. Fortunately, it's it's her who knows how to do that, not, I don't know, Cooney, maybe.
Yeah. But
But you know what
hopefully,
isn't clear, by the way? You
yeah.
said have to be clear and concise. Logograms are not clear and easy to communicate with.
Oh, well,
Zindu
Just
she's
is.
another
back
like
around.
Zindu is.
just another maybe like thematic, not thematic, but like it's kind of like a motif, microcosm.
Yeah.
It's like a smaller thing that's like gesturing and talking about like a larger theme.
Yeah. I mean, it is beautiful, right? It's a flowery way to communicate. It's very imagery heavy. I mean, and there's like parallels I'm saying. I don't know if this was what Ken Liu was basing it off of, but in Chinese, there is a traditional Chinese way of writing Chinese characters and then a simplified way. And part of the reasoning for simplifying the written Chinese is so that it can be more accessible to the masses. I mean, it can be controversial, but that is like I don't think
True.
that's really like arguable. But when you look at Chinese characters, there's so much history imbued into those characters. And so one of the arguments is like, oh, you're basically erasing history by simplifying, which Zomi her take is it's not abolish the logograms. It's to just make it more accessible, the written language more
Yeah.
accessible. Yeah.
Quick thing on the logograms while we're briefly touching on it. I'm going back a good amount here, but when Luan is first showing Zomi the logograms, the first one he shows her is the one that means serenity in the face of all-consuming death. I thought that was it's kind of a funny description on it, but I thought that was an apt first logogram to show Zomi because that's like her life up to that point,
Mm.
like all-consuming death, poverty, and like the way that she had to live was kind of like one could say it's all-consuming death in a way.
Mhm.
And he's saying serenity in the face of that, which is kind of like how she's stood strong against poverty and kind of building a life for herself. I thought that was just an apt parallel there.
Nice. Do you think, and this is theory conspiracy theory
Get all the
corner.
theories out. I'm ready.
Do you think it's gonna end the series at least with not Thera but Zomi?
Yes,
Oh
I was just thinking that.
I don't think so.
no, why not?
No, I'm
I don't
100%.
think she has like the political know-how to even end
Mm,
up there. I think she works better as an advisor to
mm,
the person who has the political know-how.
These kids, Cooney's kids, like they're privileged. You know, they don't know how it is to live on the streets. You got to know it to be able to have the perspective.
mm. I mean, Zomi literally tells Thera, right? Thera thought that she found a kindred spirit in Zomi, but Zomi
Yeah.
on
That was
she,
cringe.
yeah, she was so mean to Thera. Like, you are so
I
privileged.
I wrote that down. I think is learning from it.
Mm, I think so too.
I think that's a turning point in her character of kind of being shown, hey, I wrote it down that Your Highness, do not use the word envy so casually when you do not know the paths others have trod on. Few women, no few people, have the advantages you possess. If you lament that you cannot live as you like, perhaps it is because you have not tried to live as yourself at all.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
love
That
that
last
quote
bit,
because
beautiful.
Mhm.
Thera was so spoiled in that thinking,
Yeah.
wishing she could have that life. Like you have,
Yeah.
you can do what you want. You
Live
can
Yeah,
your own
wish.
life.
romanticizing,
Yeah,
yeah, what others have.
So yeah.
What if Thera gets the throne, immediately cedes it to Zomi?
Whoa, I would not see that coming.
I wouldn't like that decision.
I'm like trying to just study Yetti and like what's his tell here, you know? Like we're at a poker table.
you guys
He
are.
hides his mouth every time.
All it's gonna take is like one, maybe two chapters, and you guys are gonna be like, oh, okay. I
Oh,
see what's
really?
going
All
on.
You're
right, I'm reading that
You
Oh
guys
tonight.
are so
boy.
close to see what I. Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Anything else people want to discuss before we close?
That's all the theories.
yeah, we've interspersed theories here and there.
That's true.
I do have a couple quick things.
Hmm.
One, the scene when Cooney sees Mata's mirror reflection was really good. It was like full of emotion, but like subtle emotional scene. That'd also be a really cool scene for like a movie trailer, just like him staring at that.
I want to
That would
see
go
this
hard. That would
adapted.
go hard in a movie trailer.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool. Yeah.
Also, Cooney singing a song after getting the letter about Timu. I was like, such a Cooney move.
Yeah.
He's so dramatic.
He
So
takes out the loot.
melodramatic.
He
Takes up
takes
the
out the
loot.
loot. Gets it. I was
I
laughing
was
this time.
laughing.
I mean, I just too. Like, just can you imagine if you're like a guard around there and he's so strumming out? I know what I got to do.
Like this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say my one little shout out scene was actually when the God of War
Fifth Away-o.
picked his flower, picked him. I can't
Mhm.
even remember what flower it is at this point.
Yeah, it's like an orchid or
An
something.
orchid.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when he was saying like you can see, right?
Mm,
You just can't see in the way you used to, you know.
right.
And it's all about perspective. I thought that was a really beautiful scene, and Ken Liu is phenomenal at these little short stories that he kind of throws in,
Hmm.
you know, sporadically throughout the book, and I thought that was really moving.
Yeah. Get ready for a short novella coming up. I liked a couple things I liked. I love the idea about weighing the fish and how that plays into multiple points in the story with Zomi. It's so simple and just endearing way that her and Luan bonded. I really liked when who are the kids' teachers? Master Ruthie, right?
Yeah.
He makes me laugh.
Oh yeah.
Any scenes with those guys when they prank him and then they have to like kind of apologize and cover their tracks and Cooney covers for him and says actually they were trying to apologize. This was their way of
Just
apologizing.
talking around him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Y-
kind of tricking him.
Oh, that was funny.
You know who
Very
that reminds
sitcom-y at
me
the
of?
beginning.
For some reason, I just think of what's that character in Mulan? The one that is like always with the clipboard and like
Yeah, the advisor guy.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I forgot his name. Anyway, that's how I kind of see him.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
do
guy.
not know.
He's funny. And then definitely with the kids, one of my favorite scenes is when they have to pick, and guys kind of alluded to it. They had to pick a historical figure to study, and it says so
Mm.
much about each kid by who they
Mhm.
pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yep. The weighing the fish. That reminds me of the saying of you can't delegate understanding. Like if you don't understand it yourself,
Hmm.
you can't really delegate it. Although to be fair, there's only so much one person can really understand. So that's where it's like, okay, how can you surround
Oh,
yourself with people that can help you understand in an efficient
oh.
manner?
Luan Zia said, "You never stop learning." What are you going?
Yeah. And honestly, I think if you really enjoy this series, at least so far, I would say that curiosity is a main trait of you as a person. Because
Oh, thank you. Oh, me or the
yeah,
listener?
you're welcome.
Oh,
All of
okay.
us, I think.
Okay, good.
Um, because like Spook had said, that education part about explaining the logograms and like if you actually enjoy that part, curiosity is I think a main trait as to why you enjoy it. And I think overall we could all use a bit more curiosity, and it's curiosity in so many different ways, right? Curiosity about other people, curiosity about history, about our surroundings, about how things work. Yeah.
That's why I love Luan Zia. I mean, he has this childlike wonder, even at his age, through and through, that he's always curious about the world and how things work in different cultures. And it's something to aspire to, I think, sometimes. At least for me, when I sit my cushy life sometimes, I'm like, all I'm curious about is how Better Call Saul is going to end or something.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so. I have a bunch of quotes, but I'm not going to read them.
I, honestly, like if I were to do this again, I would take a slower pace, like with our episodes, and go deeper. But at the same time, I am curious how this series is gonna end. So like I'm reading it for the plot right now.
Yeah.
I took
You guys
1,000
aren't.
words of notes this time.
Jeez. I got 682, so
That's solid.
most of it was written today.
Yeah. I can just promise you guys will not have any problems trying to cram in finishing before our next episode. Like
Yeah.
I
gonna go
will
it's
be
gonna go down smooth.
tonight. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm so ready to be able to read again.
Yeah, I'm definitely starting tonight.
I
All
gotta finish
right.
another book first, so soon.
And with that, thank you all for listening. I hope that we gave you something new to think about. If you would like to engage in a discussion with us, check out the Legendarium's Discord. We are quite active on there, and we would love to have more people to chat about the series with. Thank you to my fellow panelists, and until next time, bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.